What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Dirty Bird Fly Through. Before we get started with the video, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share it out. All the support is greatly appreciated. And we're here to preview the Week 4 matchup. The Atlanta Falcons back at home, back in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, after a two-game road trip early in the season to face a team that they have had quite the history with in recent years. The team that has really been one of the biggest humps for the Falcons in these past 4 or 5 years, and that is the Washington Commanders. It's a team that obviously we have a lot of history with. 2021, we lost to them at home in a nail biter. 2022, we had the ball on the goal line, and a certain quarterback who we're going to be talking about here, who is actually a major subject now in this game, threw an interception in the final minute of the game. 2023, the Falcons really lost that game because they just did not have good quarterback play. And last year, obviously, the amazing game, Week 17 on Sunday Night Football, where Michael Penix led us down the field in the final minute. And the Falcons had an opportunity to win. Obviously, if you watch that game, you know how it went. Washington won the coin toss in overtime. The Falcons never saw the ball. The Commanders won, went to the playoffs. That game is ultimately why the Falcons did not make the playoffs last year. So, it's a very big game heading in regardless. And I said, really from the moment I saw the schedule, really from the moment I knew that these two teams were going to be playing each other this year, this was going to be one of the biggest games the Falcons were going to have all year. It being at home, this is a game that I've had a lot of confidence in, but obviously the results that, we have seen just in the past week, it changes a lot of how you think about the team. So, before we actually talk about this game, I do think it's necessary to talk about the necessity of putting last week behind us. Now, a game like the one we had last week is going to be very hard to forget. It's going to be very hard to just throw it in the trash can and, never look at it again. Because that was a division game. That was a game that you were favored by 5.5. It is a game you were supposed to win, and the way that you lost that game is not just something that you can completely disregard. It showed a lot of the issues the Falcons had going into that game. And now it's important that while you never really forget that game, you use it as an opportunity for a reset. Because you have to move forward from last week. If you let the game last week define your season, then it's going to be a very rough season. So, it's one game. It's very tough to say because it was a division opponent. It was a very important game. It was a game you felt like the Atlanta Falcons had to win. But there's still, including this Sunday, 14 games left. And if you're going to let that one game in Charlotte dictate your entire season, then that, I think, shows how poor this coaching staff and this team actually is. But you cannot let this game define you. You got to use it. You got to definitely take it as a learning lesson nonetheless. And you have to use it as a reset. Because that is the only way the Falcons are going to be able to move on from this. That's the only way that you're going to get better from this, is to use it as a reset. Now, getting into the actual game we have on Sunday, and taking a look at the injury report. And for both of these teams, there's some pretty notable names on the injury report. Starting for the Atlanta Falcons, the most notable name, once again, is cornerback A.J. Terrell, who suffered a hamstring injury in Minnesota. He missed last week versus the Panthers, and he's going to miss again this Sunday. And it's not particularly shocking. The Falcons do have a bye week after this week. You are, I think, definitely going to see A.J. Terrell after the bye week, but I think this is just a scenario of really playing it safe, especially considering that some of the injuries that Washington has, in particular to Terry McLaurin. Um, Outside of that, Kadero Hodge, who did not practice all week with a groin injury, is out. Running back Nate Carter, hamstring injury, he is out. And then everybody else, good to go. Now, as far as Washington goes, this is a team that is really beaten up. Tight end John Bates is out on Sunday with a groin injury. Noah Brown is out Sunday. Terry McLaurin with a quad injury is out Sunday. I think that probably kind of played into the decision making of whether or not AJ Terrell is going to play on Sunday. Because now with Terry McLaurin out, you don't necessarily need to necessarily focus on shutting down Terry McLaurin. Washington still does have a very versatile threat in Deebo Samuel, but obviously Terry McLaurin can change everything. Percy Butler, safety with a hip injury. He did not practice all week. He is out. And running back Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, he did not practice Wednesday or Thursday. He did return to practice. He is questionable. And obviously the big name is Jayden Daniels. So we're not going to get the Daniels Penix rematch. We are going to have to wait at least another year for that. Jayden Daniels dealing still with the knee injury that he suffered a couple weeks ago. He is going to be out of the game on Sunday. So, when talking about the status of Jayden Daniels, of Washington's star quarterback, the rookie of the year last year, the guy who broke the Falcons' hearts week 17 last year, he is out, and that makes way for someone we know all too well in Marcus Mariota. Obviously, who spent the 2022 season here, majority of it starting at quarterback. That was obviously right after Matt Ryan left. And he came in, and overall, he kind of fulfilled his role. He did, have some bright spots, especially in that offense. But in the end, we all know how it ended with Marcus Mariota, where obviously he essentially did quit on the team. He left the team in the final few weeks of the season to not finish out that 2022 season, and after that was cut from the team. Since then, he has been around the league, and he is now with Washington. He has been with Washington, I believe, for the past two seasons, being Jayden Daniels' backup. And last week, Marcus Mariota actually started against the Raiders, and he had a very solid outing. It really feels like you can really put Marcus Mariota in there and pretty much run almost the same game plan as Jayden Daniels. Does Mariota have that young explosiveness Daniels have? Just really that enigma around him? No. But he can pretty much do everything Jayden Daniels does. So you got to be aware for that. Marcus Mariota, it's not like, oh, your game plan changes. Washington's going to come out. They're going to do the same thing. So it's very important that the Atlanta Falcons come out ready to stop the run, because that is going to be Washington's biggest weapon on Sunday, is going to be trying to get those read options going. Really trying to get Marcus Mariota going with his legs, because that is obviously how they open up their entire offense. Now, obviously, the big thing for the Atlanta Falcons heading into this game is going to be, how does Michael Penix respond from easily the worst game in his career a week ago? And it's put a lot of pressure on number 9 this week. How is he going to respond? And it's really raised questions of, once again, what is he made of? And we're going to figure that out on Sunday. We're going to see how Michael Penix is able to respond to the pressure that's been on him. And obviously, the worst performance of his career that we saw a week ago in Charlotte. He threw 2 interceptions. He got sat down in the fourth quarter, and Kirk Cousins came in, because that's how bad the Falcons were out of it. Mainly, a big part of that was Michael Penix. Now, we saw Michael Penix last year versus this exact same team, and only his second game starting. He had an up and down game, but we saw him late in Landover throw a big pass to Kyle Pitts to tie that game up, to put the Falcons in a position to win. We know Michael Penix has it. We know that he is able to make those big plays with his arm. So it's really going to be up to him on Sunday to do that. Now, in order for Michael Penix to play well, you got to get those wide receivers involved. You got to get the tight end involved. And that is the job of Zach Robinson. Because obviously, as much pressure as you put on Zach Robinson, or you put on Michael Penix, Zach Robinson has to take a lot of the brunt for that. And he has. Him being the offensive coordinator, Zach Robinson will be moving down to the field on Sunday to shore up the communication issues. I do believe that Zach Robinson, I'm not sure if he was on the field or not in the preseason in week 1, but I know that last week in Carolina, in Minnesota also, he was up in the booth. Zach Robinson has to be down on the field and communicating with his young quarterback. That is the only real way you're actually going to be able to key in on Michael Penix's development and make sure that it is being done properly. Something had to change, and this obviously, this and the firing of Ike Hilliard were really the two biggest stories coming out of Flowery Branch. And it really feels like drastic measures. We're going to see how they work out. And I'd be lying if I say there wasn't almost a little bit of panic in them. But at the end of the day, Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris know that their jobs are on the line. But Zach Robinson in particular, on I believe it was Thursday, he spoke. And he was questioned about his usage of the pistol formation. And he was pretty defiant. He did not, look back and say, maybe we do need to step back from how much we're using it over the course of a game. It's not that I hate the pistol formation. Now, I'm not going to lie to y'all. I definitely have more of a disdain for it now than I did previously because of how much you see it. But every team has their foundation, I understand that. But when you stay in the same formation for 80 to 90% of the whole game, there is really only so much creativity you are actually allowed in that formation, as you are if you stay in any formation. It's the same if you stay in the I formation, you stay in shotgun. There's really only so much you can actually do until the defense fully catches on to you and your tendencies. So Zach Robinson's defiance with the pistol, it could very well get him in trouble in this game and might land him on the unemployment line if he doesn't actually have a come to Jesus moment and realize that, well, the pistol is your foundation. You have to open it up. You have to get Michael Penix under center. You have to get him in shotgun. You have to really open this thing up. You have a quarterback who has an arm, and you have to put trust in. Despite Michael Penix's bad game last Sunday, he is still, at the end of the day, he is still your quarterback. You have to develop him, and you have to give him the trust to go out and make those plays. Now, obviously, this is all centered around getting your wide receivers involved, getting your playmakers involved, getting your tight ends involved. That means Kyle Pitts. That means Darnell Mooney. That means Drake London. Because throughout the first 3 games of the season, really all 3 of them, especially our 2 wide receivers, Darnell Mooney did not play week 1, but still. Drake London, I think in particular, it's been very disappointing to see the lack of really them getting him the ball. It, really feels like that there hasn't been a game where you see Drake London eat yet. Like you saw him versus Tampa last year. Like you even saw versus Philly last year. You saw Drake London really have just as much of an impact on games as Bijan Robinson does last year. And you need to get back to that, especially knowing that we have seen Drake is Michael Penix's guy. That is a connection that is very strong, but that connection can only thrive as much as you are willing to actually spread the ball and make efforts to be more creative. You also got to get the ball to Darnell Mooney. He is supposed to be the deep threat on this team. He's supposed to be a guy that you could really catch and stride for a couple of these balls. And of course, Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts should be that guy over the middle. We saw the Falcons get Kyle Pitts the ball in week one. We saw it some in week two, but it really felt like, once again, last week. You know, it feels like they're getting him the ball, but they're not giving him nearly enough opportunities that he should be getting. You got to spread the ball out. That is the dynamic nature of this offense that could make it dangerous. Is you have so many guys at the disposal for Michael Penix. You cannot just use number 7. You have to open the pass game up. And if you do not, then that's just going to create more issues long term, even past this Sunday. If you do not open the passing offense up, you do not get Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Darnell Mooney and Ray McLeod here and there going, that is truly going to limit what you can do on offense. And Bijan Robinson is only so much of a dynamic player to carry you. You have other guys that you have to get involved. Now, we've talked about this offense, but there's going to be a test for this defense, I think, on Sunday. Because throughout the first 3 weeks, overall the Atlanta Falcons defense has done pretty well. They had flashes versus Tampa, and while they couldn't get it done late, they still showed flashes. Obviously, the highlight of the season really has been the defensive performance up in Minnesota, where you saw 6 sacks and 4 turnovers off of that Viking squad. And last week, even though the defense, it kind of felt like did take a step back in general, they were really not the reason that we lost that game, especially considering Michael Penix's pick 6 and his other interception that really took Carolina all the way down deep into the Falcons' territory. So it really wasn't on the defense, but still, it's going to be a big test on Sunday, especially considering I think it's safe to say that Marcus Mariota is still going to be the best running quarterback the Falcons have faced all season. And week one, Baker Mayfield actually was able to get some gusty scrambles off of this Falcons defense. And that was actually a true backbreaker in that game. So you're going to have to see this defense come out. I think it's an opportunity for them to really reestablish their dominance, like we saw up in Minnesota. But I think it's going to truly be a key if the Falcons actually want to win this game. We could talk all day about the offense. You still have to keep that Washington offense in check, because if you let Cliff Kingsbury get into his groove, calling the plays and actually opening up their playbook, and we see Marcus Mariota get comfortable, it doesn't really matter what the offense could do. It could still be a pretty rough day out there. So you got to see the defense step up. I would love to see Jalen Walker, this be a game that they use him as a quarterback spy. They have him locked in on Marcus Mariota's every movement. They make sure that he is shut down. That should be the job of Jalen Walker and Caden Ellis. If you can do that, your defense could definitely be set up. With Jeff Ulbrich, we have seen some versatility, but we're going to have to see it again. We're going to have to see Marcus Mariota be shut down with his legs on Sunday. Now, obviously, this is a game full of stories, as it is every year, it feels like. And this is one we do have to talk about. Dan Quinn is returning to the Benz on Sunday. This is the first time Dan Quinn will step back in Mercedes-Benz Stadium since he was fired back in 2020. And at the end of the day, you could think whatever you want about Dan Quinn. I have opinions about Dan Quinn and his time here. The man got us to a Super Bowl. He obviously was the head coach for that historic 2016 team. We know how that ended, but still, he had a 43-42 record here. 2 playoff appearances. It was the pinnacle of Matt Ryan's career that Dan Quinn saw. And obviously, Dan Quinn has reinvented himself now as Washington's head coach. Just as much as I think this past Sunday, we truly saw Dan Quinn go out there. And here's something. When we used to call him Dairy Queen and something like that, he's not that anymore. We saw the man get a bloody nose on Sunday. He got right back up on his feet. The man has learned since he left Atlanta. He is not the same coach. I do not necessarily think highly of Dan Quinn because of his time in Atlanta, but he is a much better coach. He is a leader of that football team. He is a leader of men. He's going to have that team fired up, and this is going to be a game that means something to him. So this is not going to be a game. I don't care how many people Washington has out. I don't care if Jayden is out, if McLaurin is out, if Merritt is out, who is out. Dan Quinn's going to have them fired up to go into the bins. So the Falcons, Raheem Morris obviously knows Dan Quinn very well. It needs to be a priority to get the lick back from last year. And speaking of Raheem Morris, this is an absolute must-win for him. This is a must-win for the Atlanta Falcons, and this is a must-win for Raheem Morris because based off obviously last week, and I know I said you want to put it behind you, but that's not a game you're just gonna be able to completely throw away. Based off what we have seen so far, the Atlanta Falcons dating back to obviously the 2-6 finish that we saw them have last year and are 1-2 to start this season. It's a 3-8 record in their past 11 games. So if Raheem Morris wants to save face, I think forget the fan base, but with the front office, with Arthur Blank, he's going to have to start turning it around. This is a must-win game. It's at home. It's week 4. And it's really tough for your season to be done after 3 weeks. But if you lose this game, you drop to 1-3. Tampa has a couple games up on you already. You're already 0-2 in the division. It's really hard to see this team making the playoffs. Really, honestly, with how they performed last Sunday, period. But if you drop to 1-3, there's essentially no chance. And the standard was set before the season. It's either you make the playoffs or this front office is going to get cleaned. This coaching staff is going to get cleaned. With a bye week coming up, Raheem Morris has to make a statement. He has to go into this bye week with a win. And if not, it's going to start creating, obviously, a lot of pressure on him, as you would imagine. But it's going to force Arthur Blank to start having a very tough discussion. So this is a must-win for everybody involved with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, as far as the players to watch, for the Falcons, it's simple. It's your quarterback. It's Michael Penix Jr. I already talked about it. How are you going to respond? How are you going to respond to the pressure? How are you going to respond to the doubt? This is a very big opportunity. We've heard a lot all week about how Michael Penix has been taking accountability. That's all great. The biggest way to take accountability, the biggest way to basically say you're sorry, like you said to the defense in the middle of the week during practice, is to go out on Sunday and prove it. You have to prove that you are the quarterback of this team. I fully believe in Michael Penix, and y'all know this. But I gotta see him go out and do it. Because eventually every NFL quarterback has that spot where they're going to face that adversity. And are they going to adapt? Are they going to polish up their game? Are they going to get better? Or are they just going to cave in? And as what ruins a young quarterback's career a lot of the time. So Michael Penix, I'm definitely going to be looking out for that on Sunday. Now, as far as Washington goes, it was really tough with the injuries. Obviously, outside of Marcus Mariota, it's the number one weapon on offense that they are for sure to have this Sunday in Deebo Samuel. And after trading for him this offseason, obviously, it feels like that Deebo is going to definitely get way more opportunities this Sunday, especially if Merritt is out for Washington. You're going to see, I think, Deebo Samuel in the backfield. You're going to see a lot of RPOs with Deebo Samuel involved. It's going to get very creative how Cliff Kingsbury is going to decide to use Deebo Samuel. So you always got to be accounting for him because it's either going to be Mariota or it's going to be Samuel. If Washington wants to get their offense going, it's going to go through one of those two men. And that is why the Falcons must make it a mission. And I'm looking at the linebackers because Deebo Samuel is not just your prototypical wide receiver. You know, he really is used like a running back. So I'm really looking at, obviously, the linebackers on Sunday. Kane Ellis, Divine Diablo. Obviously, Jalen Walker, as I mentioned earlier. These are guys that have to have a big game on Sunday and really show up if the Falcons want to hold it down on defense. Now, as far as keys to victory goes, number one, I need Michael Penix to bounce back. He cannot have a game like he had in Charlotte again. If he does, the Falcons will lose. I do expect Michael Penix to bounce back. I think that, you saw him have his welcome to the NFL reality check last Sunday. So now you're going to see how he bounces back, and I expect him to do so. The second key to victory is obviously going to be balancing the offense out. Listen, whenever Bijan Robinson gets the ball, and we know this, he is electric. He can make anything happen, it feels like. He can wow you at any given moment. But you got to balance the offense out. You got to get this passing game going. And you have to also do it, formation-wise, how you're lining up. You got to make an emphasis, I especially think, to get a guy like Drake London involved Sunday. It feels like Drake has been starving for that big game all season. It's time to see it on Sunday. So you got to balance this offense out. You got to get more guys involved to kill a lot of those narratives that you are seeing. And if not, it could create for another rough day potentially for this offense. I'm not talking about getting shut out again, but it could still be pretty rough if you do not balance things out. And the third key to victory is going to be containing the quarterback, containing Marcus Mariota. If you are able to limit what Mariota is able to do with his legs, and you put pressure on him to make plays from the pocket, I think that puts the Falcons in a prime position. But you got to limit him from making plays with his legs, because that is ultimately how you are going to stay in a good position on defense all game. So, as far as final predictions, this is a game that I have said since May that the Falcons were going to win. That I didn't expect a lot of people to predict us to win. I thought we were going to be underdogs, and we are. But also looking at the injuries, I even think a lot of people realize that this has to be a big spot for the Falcons to bounce back. No Jayden Daniels, no McLaurin, potentially no Merritt, no John Bates. You still have Zach Ertz, who you do have to worry about, though. But John Bates is a very key part also of Washington's offense. But in the end, I think the Falcons are going to win. I think, to predict the Falcons are going to blow them out, I just think is asinine. I do expect it to be a close game. I think that you're going to ultimately see, though, in the end, Michael Penix take the reins of this game, just kind of like how we saw Jayden Daniels do last year in Washington on Sunday night, and we're going to see Michael Penix go down and lead the Falcons to a victory. I got to see it. I got to see Michael Penix have a bounce back. And this is a very much a must-win game, because once again, if you do not win this game, you drop to 1-3, you're already 0-2 in the division. Your season's essentially going down the toilet. I know I said it's very hard for your season to be over after 3 weeks, but for your season to be over after 4 weeks, it's a little more likely for it to happen. And this is a absolute must-win game on Sunday. With that being said, appreciate everyone for watching. Remember to like, remember to subscribe, remember to share it out. I will see you all in the next one, and take care.